All right, now I want to test your perception, if I may. What do we have here? What is that? Any idea?
Pear.
A what? That's a pear?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? No, sorry. That's a pear.
Oh.
Oh, come on. Come on, you know how much I paid for that joke?
Not enough.
Not enough? Anyway, the first picture. It's not during a match, it's during practice. And it doesn't matter to me whether I'm shooting practice or a match. I'm interested in one thing and only one thing, and that's a good photograph. And you'll get them in practice. You'll get plenty of them in practice. In fact, you'll probably get more in practice because the guys are looser. Women are looser as well. So I'm showing these because I want you to see I have some validation as a professional photographer. I shot for Newsweek, Sports Illustrated, Tennis Magazine, etc. And tennis is pretty easy. I think Jay will attest to that. Always a great sunny day. You know, occasionally it might not. They'll pull the roof in and you'll have lights on. And the lights are quite good at the US Open. This is what I want you to play, big fella. You can do that.
Ready.
Yep. Now, here, and I'll save that. You recognize all these guys? You got Michael Phelps throwing a punch at Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard in the back separating them. In the extreme right-hand side is Carl Lewis. So they were all great Olympians. This is going back, fellas. Who can name it? Who? Ah, nice going. For a Haitian, how did you know that? They don't skate down in Haiti, do they? Who's the guy behind him, though? No, Rattel would never do that. Anyway, Bobby Hull was one of the guys that invented the the curved stick. You know this fella? That's the Doc. The thing that always amazed me about this picture is one of the reasons why I figure he could jump so high, his legs were so long. I mean, you take another guy his height. I don't think his legs were as long as Dr. J's. Talk about another guy who could jump. I'm getting no response. Only Jay knows who he is. This is a sad picture in many ways. I mean, just looking at it, it's not so. But when I met him in 2002, his palsy was so severe, he'd have to take some kind of medicine to just calm him down. And this is the way you saw him quite a bit. Again, this is in practice. So who cares if it's in practice or if it's in a match? It's an interesting photograph. And that's all I'm interested in. Same thing here. You can name all three of them? I'll name them for the audience. It's Connors, Mac, and Chris. And for me, these are the real stars of the US Open. These people are really quite handicapped, but they're excellent tennis players. And there's a rule in wheelchair tennis that I think most people don't realize. The ball can bounce twice. Doesn't just bounce one. That's the handicap that they get. They get that advantage of the extra step. This is so old, I forgot who these guys were. See why you want to play rugby? See, you could walk over there and say to the girls, mind if I cut in? Now, Where did Jay go?
I'm here.
Jay, oh, okay. Jay, I introduced him to this one place where if you want to be a photographer, you want to be a sports photographer, forget Madison Square Garden, forget Yankee Stadium where the Mets play, any of the professional teams, forget it. You're not getting in there. I mean, I got in a long time ago when it was a little easier, and I worked for Sports Illustrated, and that got me in. But you can't get in there on your own unless you're working for somebody important. And how do you work with somebody important without a portfolio? And one way to get a portfolio, and this is what I feel, is go to all the non-professional venues that have sports. Little League, Pop Warner League, little football leagues. This is Randall's Island. And in one day at Randall's Island, I shot 5 different events. I shot a women's rugby, men's rugby, a soccer match, a frisbee match, and a flag football. That's a lot of shooting. I mean, you go home and you got 2 full cards, and you're going to edit for a month with this stuff if you're shooting a lot, and there's nobody bothering you there. You've got complete access up and down the sidelines. You can go anywhere you want, do anything you want, and nobody's going to give you a hard time. Whereas, for example, say you go to Giants Stadium and you're shooting the Giants in a preseason game. First of all, you better know the game, because if you don't know the game, you can get killed on the sideline. And that's not hyperbole. You can wind up dead, because those guys come flying there, and they're not going to get out of your way. You've got to get out of their way. So you have to understand the game in this sense. If it's 3rd down, they're on the 20-yard line, which quarterback do you favor? Is Eli Manning? Is he going to throw a pass? Where? To whom? And that's what you want to do. You want to go on that particular individual and stay with him, and hopefully that's where Eli chooses to shoot. But with this stuff here, and the other thing is, it can be difficult to move at Giants Stadium because you're not the only photographer there. There are a bunch of them. So you got to really kind of fight for your position. And the last thing you want to shoot, and I hope Sports Illustrated doesn't yell at me for this, but you don't want to shoot a Super Bowl because there's no place to move. You got one assignment, you stay there, and you can't go anywhere else. And you wonder how Sports Illustrated gets so many different vantage points. They got a guy over here, a guy over there, a guy over there, a guy on the top. They're covered. Those guys aren't moving around, you know, because you can't move around. And the problem with that is, if something is coming your way, you can't get out of the way because you got guys on either side of you and even guys behind you. So it can be a deadly prospect. Randall's Island is great. And I'm glad Jay has picked this up, is my tension is, I like getting close. Now this is taken with a long lens. I have an 80-200 zoom, and that's taken with that. But I prefer using a 24 millimeter lens because a lot of rugby happens close to the sideline, and I want to get close to that sideline. I want to get right next to them. If these are the players, I want to be down here, just shooting like that. But there are times where that whole pack is moving, and it's moving toward you, so you got to get out of the way. Sorry. You don't have to go to Madison Square Garden to get a good photograph. This is high school basketball. You have to be good. Same thing, high school. You don't know if it's high school or pro. You know, these kids got all that equipment on. And who cares? Steve, you still with us?
Yeah.
That's what I want to see from your baseball. Use that 500. And these little things matter to me. Just little things that happen. That's one of the other things about rugby that I like is this. There's no equipment to mar your face, or your shoulders aren't out of proportion to your body. Everybody's open here. What do you see, big fella?
I see somebody's eye in there.
I wouldn't be surprised. Now, you can see the post in there. You see the shadow of the post? I'm leaning up against the post. That's where I want to be with a wide-angle lens. I want to be close to this. And what happens is when I'm close, you're close, because I bring the viewer right alongside me. And the whole perspective is different. This is what I mean by, on the sideline, you may get hit if you're going to stand there with a 24 millimeter lens. And I'm going to stand there with a 24 millimeter lens. I played rugby, so, you know, I know more or less what's going to happen. And you just have to be aware of it. You know, and if you can shoot with one hand, you got this hand free, hopefully to block anything that's coming your way. See, and the one thing about rugby is age makes no difference. There are plenty of older guys playing this game. There was one guy, I kept looking at him, I said, God, I wonder how old that fella is. So I waited for halftime, and I said, you mind me asking you how old you are? He said, I'm 56. I said, okay. So I don't want any excuses from you. You see that knee? Look at how perilously close that knee is. Fortunately, that guy is holding that knee back. Kids rugby, under 12. Girls play on the same team with boys. And the kid right behind the girl receiving the ball has a white patch in her nose. She had a bloody nose. But you play rugby, you got to be tough. And she's tough. They just padded it up, and she went right back in the game. Now, I don't know if you know what do they call the referee in football? What do they call him? Ref, right? Basketball, ref, baseball, ump, all sports, except for rugby. You know what her name is? Sir. In rugby, the referee's name is Sir. And what it does is it defines rugby, and you know this because it's from your country as well, that rugby is a savage game played by gentlemen. And that's why his name is Sir. Or this referee, her name is Donna, but everybody calls her Sir. See, you don't get this in football. And I've shot enough football to realize that. You know, this, for me, this is more like street photography. You look for the emotions. You look for things that are happening, the joys, the sorrows, the distress, the pain, the anguish. You know, and in football, you're not going to see it because you're all covered up like that. And basketball, everybody says basketball is pretty easy. You're not going to get hurt. You got to be kidding. In basketball, where do you sit? You're under the basket in a long line of photographers, and you're all packed in like sardines. Somebody comes down on a fast break like Shaquille O'Neal, who weighs 390,000 pounds, and he can't stop, and he falls on top. And the first thing you do is you pray that he falls on you and not your $3,000 lens. Please land on me. That's a tough sport to shoot, basketball, especially professional basketball. Actually, that looks like the, what is it, the Heisman Trophy thing? The girl's got the perfect pose for that. Again, I'm right under the basket, you know, and I get low with the camera so I can get that severe angle, but I'm putting you in the game. Kid right next to me. He goes down and just held the camera like that. I didn't want to bend down and shoot it. I didn't want to distract him from what he was feeling. So I just kind of casually turned the other way and just put it like that. They're autofocus cameras, so you can't miss. Here you get the whole team. You know, and if you're shooting with a long lens, it flattens everything, you're not going to get this depth. I have a feeling that might have been called a foul. There's a wonderful line in one of William Butler Yeats's poems on limbs that run wild. And look at, those are the limbs. You know, it's a simple photograph, but there's so much going on in that photograph, even in its simplicity. So don't turn away from anything. Just keep looking and keep searching. The other thing is, if you know how to pray, pray for rain. At least I do. Not at Randall's Island, because Randall's Island they use carpet, which I hate. But out in Jersey, when they play on real grass and dirt and mud, this is what you get. That makes the photos. I love these, stuff like that. And the other thing too is, how far am I away from those girls? I'm right next to them. And that's not going to happen in Yankee Stadium, fellas. Let's forget it. Ain't going to happen in Madison Square Garden. You're not getting near the players. I want to be near the players. This is in my town. I live in Harrington Park, and I just stand under the basket and wait for the kids to show up. And again, not everything is going to be action. There's no action in here. But I like the photograph. I think it's an interesting photograph. And that's all I'm interested in, guys. Doesn't have to be action, but it's got to be something interesting. Oh, this is one of the smartest girls I've ever seen in my entire life. The one Oriental girl, that is the smartest rugby player for one reason. That's what she did. She waited for the girl to pass her. There's no way she was getting in front of that locomotive. I'm sorry, Coach, but I just didn't want to take her head on. So wait until she passes and grab. I did that too when I was playing rugby. You come like some big guy like that, and you just wait until he passes you, jump on his back and yell for help. I love the new mouthpieces, you know, they look like vampires, these kids. You should recognize this. This is down in Antigua. And what I love about these children, and none of them can swim. They really can't. They don't swim. They've never been taught to swim. But they have no problem going in the water. They know how far they can go. They know what their limits are. These are kids that are raised on the streets, dirt streets with lots of rocks and pebbles. And one of the reasons, and I don't think you guys have this as much as we do further south, is cricket. I'm sure you do have it to a certain degree. But some of the greatest cricketers are from Antigua, especially one, Vivian Richards, who is now Sir Vivian Richards. And the reason these kids are so good at cricket is because they get balls from the tennis camps. They give them the old balls, and the kids use the old balls to play cricket. But they're not playing on manicured pitches. They're playing on side streets where it's just dirt and rocks. And when they bowl, that ball bounces all over the place. And as a result, you have to have the quickest reflexes in order to do that. And what they do, they also play a lot of rubber ball cricket. They play it on the beach. They'll get some posts, stick up the posts, they'll get a palm frond and use that as a bat. They'll trim it down, use that as a bat, and then they bowl. And what happens is when the ball hits the water, it doesn't bounce up, it skims along the water. So if you're the batter, you have to be really quick to make that adjustment. If the water goes out and the ball hits, then the ball will go up. So it's interesting as to why the Antiguans particularly are such good cricketers. And look at them, any of them, I have a thigh that weighs more than all of those kids. Again, it doesn't have to be action. There's a mood here. This is a lonely, sad mood. It's a gray day. She's all alone. There's nobody else there. And she's about to kick. Now, you want to talk about minimalist proportions. I don't need the whole body. You know as well as I do what's happening here. They're playing basketball. Why? Because you see a ball, you see the sneakers, you see the uniforms, you see what they're wearing. And that's all I want, is an interesting photograph. Same thing here. I went inside to these kids. It's down in Teaneck, New Jersey, and they have this cage area where they play soccer. It's not a full court, but it's enough for these kids to play. And I asked them, I said, do you mind if I come and sit down on the field? I want to be right. And they said, well, you're going to get hit. I said, good, I'll get hit. I'm not going to worry about it, but I want to be there because that's where the photos are. So they let me in. I love the guy looking through the arm there. He's got a Wolf's hat on. A great guy, really neat guy. When the game's over, the pictures aren't over. So jump in there. Get next to these guys. And then that's the nice thing about Randall's Island. Everybody's so friendly. Nobody's going to say anything. Nobody's going to say, get the hell out of here. What are you doing? Whatever. And what these guys do is they play flag football. And they have a league. And every week they play. And at the end of the season, they add up all the points, and one team will get X amount of dollars for charity. Nobody makes any money on this. And I love that heroic angle, shooting down low. I mean, look at that guy's a champion. I don't care what anybody says about him. He's heroic. I get chills every time that kid looks at me. This is rare when I do that. I usually don't shoot wide, but I wanted to shoot this to define where it is. I mean, there's no way you're going to mistake that city for anybody. That's not Chicago. It's not Los Angeles. I wanted to define New York City, you know. And it's on an island because you see the water. But you see the Chrysler Building and the Empire State Building and the MetLife Building. I can remember, let me tell you one quick story about when Mayor Koch was running the city. There were buildings going up all over the place. You know, and remember in the old days you had to take a light meter out and take a reading. Now you don't have to do anything. The camera does everything for you. So you had to take a reading. So I was going crazy with all these buildings, and I wrote to the mayor. I said, Mayor, cease the building. The city's down 2 stops. Again, this is flag football, but you know, they mix it up, and there's a little tussle in there. And I could care less if it's flag football. This is what I'm interested in, is this kind of configuration. The guy with the quarterback is a photographer, professional photographer, but he was a good athlete. This was a tough picture because this kid lost, and he was tearful. And it's a tough picture to take because you don't want to embarrass him. He's down enough, but I just had to get it. When I was younger, girls never played on the same field as boys, you know. I grew up in a bad era, you know. Well, this defines it. See the guy grabbing for the flag. That's what he wants to do. Once he grabs the flag, he'll yell, and the play will stop. Okay, how many of you all played baseball at one time? If not baseball, stickball, right, in the schoolyards? How many times did you ever hear the coach say, keep your eye on the ball? This kid kept his eye on the ball. He kept keeping his eye on the ball. I never understood that anyway. How do you say to a 6-year-old, keep your eye? He doesn't know what the hell that means. What an abstraction that is, keep your eye on the ball. You know, you say, oh, Frisbee, what the heck is Frisbee? It's such a genteel sport. It's a lot of fun. And you can get some very nice photographs photographing these kids. I love mistakes like that. It's just so surreal. See that big husky thing in the middle is my son, Anthony. He's a tennis player. Never played squash before. So we went down to Antigua, and Curtin Bluff, the hotel there, has a great squash court. And he's playing against a professional tennis player. George Hardy played on the tour back in the 80s. And George had wins over Newcomb, Nastasi. This guy was a hell of a tennis player. And he taught my son how to play, and Anthony picked it up very quickly. Now, the other thing, and I notice this all the time, depends upon the time of the day. I love to look for shadows. I mean, the shadow for me makes the picture. Otherwise, it's just an interesting picture of a kid driving to the basket. My son, with a 2-hand backhand, which we changed real quickly, he's 2 years old. He was playing tennis. There he is. He's 5.5. What I like about this and why I document my son is because nobody taught him this. I mean, nobody taught him when you see a high ball, you get back on your back foot, you raise your hand, you follow the ball, you know, get your racket up and get ready to hit. He was such a great natural athlete, and I like seeing photographs like this. Because a lot of kids, you got to stand there and say, do this, do that. We never had to do that with him. We were lucky. Same thing in soccer. I mean, he's got his arm out ready to push that kid off the ball. That's Casey Miller, who was a real good athlete. There he is. He could fill the cage. He was so big as a kid. There he is, a lot older. That's another thing I like doing in tennis. If I'm shooting tennis, I watch the players, especially off the backhand. Rafa Nadal is especially good at that. Is I watch where the racket goes, and if I can get it blurring in front of their face, I want that added element in the photograph. There's another thing. Again, I know I'm being braggadocious toward my son, but the reason I like this so much is, you know, a lot of kids will run and they'll look down at the ball and everything. Anthony's ready to pass it. He's already surveying the field, and he's ready to pass the ball. Now, this is a thing I call suburban rugby, because the kids in my neighborhood, they'll choose up sides, and they'll go out and they'll play football. But they'll tackle. No two-hand touch, no flag football. They'll tackle. And the one thing I liked about Anthony in this is he wasn't leading with his head like I used to when I played football. You always hit with your head. In rugby, you don't. You turn it to the side and you hit with the shoulder. And that's an instinctive thing he did there, which I liked. Again, you know, the action may be not even happening. I don't care. I care about the anticipation of it happening. So you focus on one guy, and this guy always had the same expression on his face, and he made the photograph. The other thing is, in many ways, I miss film, because that granular texture you don't get from this new stuff. Not that I'm knocking the new stuff. It has its advantages. But I like the texture of film. And this is push 2 stops. You know, it's Tri-X at 400. You go to 800, 1600. And this you get. And you print it on Agva 6, and you have a nice photo. Same thing here. You know, you get that painterly quality out of film. This is in Jersey City, not far from where I grew up. And what a better backdrop could you have than the New York skyline? And these kids were down there every day in the summer. You know, and I loved it, because they were very friendly. And where are you going to find a more bucolic, more interesting swimming hole than the Hudson River? And right now, that pier has a Hyatt hotel on it. I mean, it's all been gentrified. I don't know where the Puerto Ricans went, but they're not there anymore. They've been repossessed. And that whole area looks like a mirror image of New York City. It's all skyline, big glass buildings. And when you walk out of this place and you go to the corner of 34th Street and 9th Avenue, look up to your left. Buildings there. There's not going to be any light in here. I have a feeling the city is very claustrophobic, because these buildings are just encroaching. Again, where are you going to find a better backdrop? An interesting story here. I said to the kids, I said, look, can you go up on that stanchion, that pile? You can barely see it. Can you climb up that pile and dive off there? And they said, yeah, we can do that. I said, great, I'd love for you to do it. And he said, but we're only going to do it once. I said, why? What's the big deal? He said, because we don't know what's in that river. Because when they swim in the river, they swim pretty much on the surface. They don't go deep, because deep you can find an abandoned car, a dead horse. There are all kinds of things there if they go, you know, down 12 feet. And when you're up that high, you pretty well try and make it a shallow dive, because you don't want to go straight down, because you may not come back up. So they said, we'll give you one shot. And the photo gods were with me, because I got one shot and it was perfect. The kids were separated. They weren't touching anything like that. If I had to do it again, it might not be nearly that good. Again, I'm interested in form, shape, light, dark, you know, and minimalist proportions. Now, this may not look like a sport, but if you think lighting a firecracker in your teeth is not a sport, I'll tell you. I used to do that. It was just insanity when you look back. You say, God. But what I used to do was I would take the wick and rub it a little bit to knock some of the powder out of it, so it wouldn't burn as quickly. It would burn a little slower. So you look like you were a real tough guy, but I wasn't. You know, just let it burn, and all of a sudden you'd pick it out and you'd throw it. But the little kid in the corner is the kid that I love. All right, anybody name this? Whoever names this gets a free Italian T-shirt complete with olive oil stains and everything. Anybody? I'll give you a hint. Basketball. Okay, another hint. Probably the greatest basketball coach of all time. That could be argued, you know. That'll be argued. No? No, there's a guy better than Knight, too, out in Los Angeles. Wooden, it's between Wooden and this guy as far as the best for me. I mean, we can sit here and argue that. That's Gina Wariema, the women's coach at UConn. And one of the things I like about Gino, he was born in Italy, so I could talk Italian to him like I do with Omar Minaya. Oh, here's what I want to do. If you know anybody that is a producer of television, okay? You got two guys in a restaurant, like you have in The Godfather. Remember when Michael Corleone went in there and he shot the cop? Little tiny Italian restaurant like that. Two guys, black guys, not white guys, black guys. One of them is Omar Minaya. The other is Kobe Bryant, who speaks fluent Italian. And the two of them are arguing over the best pasta, right? Gino is the waiter. He comes over and he says, fellas, you're having an argument over it? Why don't we ask Mario? Mario's the Italian soccer player, the black kid who's 12 feet tall and has got a yellow mohawk, you know, and he speaks Italian. The whole ad would be in Italian and run subtitles with it. And the only white guy would be and Gino would be. I just think it's a great idea, having two black guys talking about pasta in an Italian restaurant and speaking Italian beautifully. So listen, go out there, you got 10% if you can sell this. Simple things, man, you know. You're looking for action. You always want to shoot action. I think this is just as important as action, as getting a wonderful moment like that. And as you get older, I can't do the things I used to, But as a kid, I go down to Hoboken, and you lie down, you sit down right next to the net, and these kids are shooting real pucks, so, if they miss, you're going to get hit. But that's where the action was. It was down low, it wasn't standing up. I was shooting some surfers in California, and all of a sudden, all the conditions were right. Again, it's the shadows. I love seeing shadows, and you usually only get them from about 11 o'clock to 2 o'clock. You get the right shadows. That's my son pulling up, running after a lob, and he's going as fast as he can, and he's, a foot away from the fence. Another thing, if you're good, you're lucky. That lens flare makes this photo. Otherwise, it's just an ordinary photo. But the lens flare makes it. And the light on that one boy's face, it's like Caravaggio, the great painter, would paint like that, where the light just goes on that face. There's your swimming hole, man. The other thing is to look around for things like this. There was one talk that I gave here about the hot weather in the city. I said, hot weather in the city means something. Something's going to happen in this city. Fire hydrants are going to open. You got to go into those neighborhoods. A lot of people don't want to go into those neighborhoods. I don't mind. And I went down to, it was 95 degrees. I'm sitting in my air-conditioned gallery. And I'm saying, you're a hypocrite. You say when it's hot, get in the city and do something. So I got in the car. I go down to NYU, where my son went to school, and they have that wonderful fountain there. And there are more pictures down there than you know what to do with. And on the way home, I'm coming up Riverside Drive, and I see a spray. So I pull over. A kid had a fire hydrant open. All Dominicans, the whole family. They couldn't have been sweeter. So I pull up, and I said, do you mind if I take some pictures? He said, no, go ahead. Said, that was it. And the kid's in a fire hydrant. I remember when I was younger, you can hear the editors from the New York Times and the Post and the news, saying to their photographers, go up to Harlem, get those cute little black kids running around and open the fire hydrants, get a lot of pictures. Yeah, okay, sure. And they stand on a sidewalk with a long lens, and they just shoot the kids. Now for me, the pictures are in the water. So get in the water, don't stand on the sideline. So what I used to do is I used to get those little waterproof cameras, those Kodak things. I'd go in the water and take pictures. The best pictures I got were in the water, not out of the water. How do I do that?
Move your mouse over.
How do I do it?
Move your mouse over a little bit.
No, on the left-hand side, how do I get rid of the preview?
I think your mouse is over it.
The mouse is over it.
Yeah.
Hey, mouse, are you over it?
No, I'm not.
He said, no, he's not. What's your name?
Topo Gigio.
It's all right. It's all right for you. Oh,
Whoa!
I hate that when you do that. If you're over 30, these things are a use. No, you got to have somebody 30 and under, and you're fine. Got twin towers, and you got a twin reflection in that kid. Now, so help me, I did not set this up. This is one of those extremely lucky accidents where everybody's in the right place, you know, and I turn around and there they are. And this is, I shot this with recording film, which had an ASA of 1,000. And I pushed it to 4,000 because I really wanted that grain. When you get a nice overcast day, you can pull that off. Here's another thing. I go in the middle of the game. Yeah, no question, I'm going to get bounced around. But I don't care, because the pictures is so much more physical when you're in the middle of the game. Now, these are things that I collect. I love, you know, arguably, and I won't take too many arguments on this, 4 greatest players of perhaps all time. I don't know. You know, you're going to throw in Kareem, you're going to throw in Oscar, but these 4 were pretty good. And Bird is like McEnroe. I don't know what I'm going to get from day to day with John, and same thing with Larry. But I mean, Carmelo's always smiling, LeBron's fine, and Magic never stops. And I was taking the picture, and I'm the only photographer there. We were doing a film shoot for the Olympics, but I'm the only still photographer. I said, fellas, this is not a funeral. I need some expression. And I was really addressing that to Larry. And sure enough, he presented, and I got a really wonderful picture. For me, it's a classic photograph, and it's worth a hell of a lot of money with those guys. Again, I'm shooting high school stuff, and I want to get in. I want to get in where these kids are. I want to see what they're feeling. Same thing there. I'm in the middle of that game. I'm getting soaked. My camera's getting soaked, and I don't care. Omar Manaya's kid, Justin, great kid, super kid. He's going to South Carolina on a scholarship. I think Justin's about 6'5". And I have one thing that I wonder about him. He's such a sweet kid. I don't know if he's going to be tough enough. His father is, but he's young yet, so he'll learn what his elbows are for. I mean, if you don't know what your elbows are for in basketball, you might as well play ping pong. It's not only the game that interests me. You turn around and you see this guy with an umbrella, you know, and the rain's coming down. It's an interesting moment. And you photograph everything. You know, and it's these lucky accidents. And they happen, if you're good, you're lucky. It's an old expression. But for me, one of the things, I love the girl in the foreground with the delicate lifting of her shorts, but it's the other girl in the back that's turned around to see what's happening that I find so interesting. I mean, it just completes the whole picture. It's beautifully balanced. You know, 9 out of 10 times you look at that, you throw it away. No, there's something mysterious about that. You say, what the heck is going on here? Steve? Here it is. What's the shutter speed? 4,000. It's the only way you're going to stop the baseball. Now look at that ball. That ball is being dented on the bat. That's a young high school kid named Nick Pulcinetti. Great batser. Strong as an ox. and he's crushing that ball. He had a home run on that ball. Okay, you say, geez, that's a great shot. You know, you're a great photographer. No, I'm not. I'm a lucky photographer. I shot for a half an hour before I got that. You know, some you miss, some you don't miss. Sometimes, you know, he swings and misses. So you keep shooting until you get it. But it's got to be 4,000. Anything less than that, you're going to get a slight blur. The guy reaching for the ball is a priest, Father Nick. But he had game, man. He was dynamite. Lousy in confession, but a hell of a ball player. Now, I showed enough pictures of my son. I had to put my daughter in there. She isn't the athlete my son is, but she tries harder than anybody, and that's all that counts. A great kid. I adore her. Again, you got that 500, Steve. Just fill the frame with things like that. This kid had a scholarship to the University of Michigan. He's a good ball player. Even at 4,000, there's a slight blur on that. Here's the question here. It's raining, okay? So what do you set your shutter speed at? 250, 500, 1,000, 2,000? It's a choice. Because if the higher you set it, the more those little droplets are going to look like little droplets. The lower, you're going to get streaks. Now, with the streaks, you might have a very impressionistic photograph. So you have to be aware of the elements and have shot enough during the rain, when it's a light rain, whether it's a heavy rain, and then you got to make a decision as to where your shutter speed's going to go. And hopefully somebody grabs the other kid's face and rips his face off. I want to take a second here to thank you for showing up, because you're the only woman in this place, and these guys have been very dull, you know. There's another woman? Oh, I couldn't see. Oh, yes, I do. My apologies. There are two women back there. I can't see that far with the light off. Anyway, ladies, thank you for being here. Both feet off the ground. That for me is that makes that kid. Again, it's not only the game you're interested in. Look around, see what's happening. And you have a bit of sense of humor, you might as well. Now here's a strange situation, and I don't do this anymore because I use the Canon 5D Mark III. And that damn camera is so good because you can go up to 10,000 ASA, 12,000 ASA, and still works. You don't like it? You haven't gotten that far yet? Try it, man. I shoot it all the time. At 10,000, 12,000 ASA, I shot a cousin of mine's wedding where the disc jockey shut the white lights off and there were only red lights on. You know, red lights, that's 4 stops off. What the hell's going on? Well, you got to be kidding. And I'm looking around and going, what am I going to shoot? So I went to 10,000, didn't work. 12,500, didn't work. 16,000, didn't work. I went to 25,000 ASA. And I waited for my cousins were dancing. They stopped at one point because I was only at 125. And I can't shoot dancing at 125. You know, you're going to get a blur. I waited until they froze and they stopped and I fired, and it's a great shot. And it's at 25,000 ASA. You can do it. This is with the 20D where it has the little pop flash. See the edging around the girl's nose on this girl here, I love that kind of dimension that it gives. So you just use that fill flash and you get that kind of information. Oh my God, this may turn somebody off for playing rugby. Look at those guys. Randall's Island. You want to practice being a sports photographer? Go to Randall's Island. What, Jay, what is it? 71, 72? Field 71, 2?
Yeah, I think 80.
I'm sorry?
The high 70s, low 80s.
Yeah, okay.
Under the bridge.
So, yeah, under the bridge. If you look for under the bridge and find a parking space, just hop out there. And they got so many fields. They got 1, 2, 3, 4 fields at one time. So you can move from sport to sport, and they're all different sports. I was playing rugby in England, out at Richmond, and the pitch was so fogged in that we couldn't play because you couldn't see anything. So these English schoolboys came by and they took over the pitch. That's good for me. I grabbed my camera and I went in the game, and I got that. And I love going in games. If the kids will let you in, go in the games. Even girls play rugby and get bloody noses. That is a rugby player. You don't need any caption, you don't need any explanation. That's the kid you want on your team. He may not be the biggest or the strongest, but you know he's going to be the craziest and the most savage, and you want him. That's why I played, because I didn't have any particular skill, but I was crazy, and you had to have an A+ to play rugby. You know, it's not like that Gaelic football, that sissy sport. That's so easy. I got pictures of it. No, the Irish rugby team this year was sensational. And again, this is the rugby players. See with his shorts hanging out? They're all like that. Irish rugby team, tough guys. I could shoot the whole game and get this shot, and that's the only shot I'd care about, because it means more to me. It says so much more. You know, that says the game. Yeah, the girls are working out. They're practicing. And where am I? I'm right there, where I want to be. Same thing here. You know, this guy falls out of bounds, he hits me. Anybody tell me what lens that was shot with? Sorry? There's something there, a technical thing that'll tell you. You may not be old enough.
Oh, I know. That's your lens.
It's an old lens.
I forgot the term of it, but it give you the round.
I would like to know why my cousin is showing up so late. You missed the best part of the show. No, you're going to have to watch it on YouTube, Andrew.
I will.
Yeah. And where's that lovely girl?
She's working today.
Oh, all right. Sir, you have a question behind Andrew.
What lens did you say it is? I
500 mirror. It's this big. You know, it's a fixed f8. So you had to adjust your exposures with the shutter speeds. But you can tell because you see the little round circles, you only got that with that mirror lens. You got it with the 500 and the 1000. The 1000 was an f11 lens. It was about that big. And it was big and round. I used to hand hold it all the time. A lot of people put it on the monopod, but I don't like monopods. So that's just a little trivia question, that's all. But it's a tough shot because you have no depth of field. You're only at f8. You can't go to f11 or f16 or f5.6, something like that. But I was lucky to get this. This is what I mean. These guys are out of bounds. So am I. But that's what can happen. If I were standing there, those guys would have crushed me. It's one of the few times I used a square. It was an old Rolly. Helen, where's that Beach Boys music that I asked for? Let's go surfing now, everybody's learning how. Again, film, push 2 stops, and all of a sudden it's pointillism. I don't know. This you really have to know baseball to understand this kind of humor in here. Anybody remember, anybody point this out? Sorry? Stand up and tell them, come on, let them have it. Tinkers to Evers to Chance. You're right. Chicago Cubs shortstop combination, very famous shortstop combination. One of the reasons why they were so famous was Tinkers didn't talk to Evers, you know, so, but they were a great doubles play. So a friend of mine wrote me a postcard, and he took some liberties with it. He could Tinker to Everett. That's Chris Everett behind me, to Chance. Tinkers to Everett to Chance. I'm glad you got that, though. Very good. This is your last time in here, though.
I'm just showing my age.
Sorry?
I'm just showing my age.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry, I'm just showing my age.
Oh, okay. I love this guy. This is at the U.S. Open. I'm photographing the practice. And this is why I say, keep looking around. You never know where you're going to find a photograph. And this is a guy called Matty the Horse. He's from Brooklyn. And this is what he's got on his tattoo. On the back, on his calf, he has Jack Nicholson in The Shining and Hannibal Lecter on the other one. A great, really wonderful, nice guy. And you see what I mean by using that wide-angle lens and getting close? That kid's diving, and I'm up here like this. I said, just dive right past the camera. If you hit my arm, don't worry about it. Just dive right past the camera. And as he does, I'm firing. And this was taken with a Leica. So I don't have a motor drive on this. This is one shot. You know, somebody said to me once, he said, boy, those girls are stupid. I go, yeah, they are really stupid, aren't they? One's from Vassar and the other's from Princeton. Yeah, they must be really stupid. God. Anyway, I want to thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you.